Welcome back to another episode of Inside the Tape on Inside the Birds Podcast Network, hosted by myself, Clay Harbor, former Philadelphia Eagle tight end, and a couple other teams, Jaguars too. I'm sure Greg knew that. And the man, the myth, the legend himself, Greg Cosell, the guy who watches more tape than I would argue anybody. I'm talking about quarterbacks in the league. This guy watches more tape than all of them, and he has a keen eye for matchups and what to look for in upcoming games and past games. And obviously, our Birds are coming off of a bye week. So today, we are going to focus on the huge matchup, Greg, the Super Bowl rematch everybody's been waiting for. We got Jalen Hurts versus Patrick Mahomes, Monday Night Football, the best team in the NFC, the best team in the AFC, in my opinion. I think this is a Super Bowl preview for this year out there in Vegas. So, Greg, huge matchup. Probably, I would say, has to be the biggest matchup of the year so far.
Probably, yeah.
Last year's Super Bowl, two best teams in AFC and NFC, respectively. What is your broad overview when you turn on the tape of this Kansas City Chiefs team, obviously coached by Andy Reid, former Philadelphia Eagles coach for a number of years, the coach that actually drafted me, Greg? I still remember draft day. Coach Reid, hello, this is Clay. We're gonna draft you with our fourth round pick. Yeah, I remember. I still remember that. Andy, the ties there. So what do we see on tape from this team? Obviously, their offense isn't looking like the offense of old. Still winning games. Patrick Mahomes' numbers, 8 interceptions, doesn't look like the old Patrick Mahomes numbers. But what are you seeing, Greg?
Well, let's just make an initial comment on each side, and then we can kind of pick it up and go from there. One of the things that's really interesting about the Chiefs' offense, which a lot of people might not be aware of, is how much relative to the rest of the league, Clay, they play out of multiple tight end sets. Because everybody with the Eagles is talking about who's the slot corner. And obviously they don't really have one until Bradley Roby is ready to play. And as you and I speak here on a Wednesday night, we don't know what his status is. But they play a lot out of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, and even 13 personnel with 3 tight ends. So normally defenses, and let's also remember the Eagles have a different defensive coordinator now than they did in the Super Bowl. So Sean Desai has been doing some different things, so we don't know what he's going to do specifically. But if he chooses to be in base defense, meaning 4 defensive backs, when they play multiple tight ends, that to me is one really intriguing matchup on that side of the ball. Then just quickly on the other side, Steve Spagnuolo is really interesting. They're not a high percentage blitz defense. They're a selective blitz defense, but they're really good at it. They're really good at disguise and late rotation. And,
yes,
I think that's one of the things that you really have to look for in this game. Jalen Hurts has shown at times the ability to recognize these things quickly, because obviously when there's late rotation and the quarterback is taking the snap, you've got to see that. You have, basically less than a second to see it. There was a great example of him doing that against the Cowboys 2 weeks ago on a 3rd and 9 where he completed a ball to Devonta Smith. But, I think that matchup right there, the disguise and the late rotation versus Jalen Hurts in the pass game is also one to look at. So just 2 quick overview points. We can, get drill down a little more, but curious your thoughts.
Yeah, and it's funny, you talk about all the 2 tight end sets, the Eagles have not been good against the tight end. They have a 130 rating allowed, second worst in the entire NFL to opposing tight ends. So that's something that scares me. And you hit the nail on the head when you talk about the rotation. And, I mean, these guys are moving all over the place. I love L'Jarius Sneed. This guy's playing at high-caliber football. And I do, as far as the safeties are concerned, I do see that rotation. But looking at this offense, you see this team is uncharacteristic as far as turnovers are concerned. I mean, they've turned the ball over 17 times. That's a 3rd most offensively in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes, 8 interceptions. So I think the Eagles will be able to get some turnovers here. But the other thing I see offensively is the Chiefs, and a lot of it has to do with Patrick Mahomes having such great pocket presence, is not many people are getting a lot of sacks on him. He's escaping the pocket. I think they've given up 8 or 12 sacks on the year, which is it's best in the NFL. And I don't think it's because their offensive line they're solid, but I think it has to do a lot with the pocket presence that Patrick Mahomes has, obviously. And then as far as matchups are concerned, I'm curious to see how they match up with, obviously, Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
Maybe try to put Bradbury on him. I wouldn't mind seeing Bradbury play on Kelce. I don't know if either of their linebackers could guard him. Cunningham, Morrow, I don't think either of those guys are playing any man-to-man or even in the zone stuff. When you're in the middle of the field with Kelce there, it is going to be tough. But when you turn on the tape, the first thing I do see is it looks like Mahomes is struggling a bit because some of these receivers aren't getting the normal separation.
Yeah. Well, a couple of points in response to what you just said. Number one, in their last 5 games, because they had a bye as well, they've only scored a touchdown on 20% of their drives, and Mahomes has 6 turnovers in those last 5 games. By the way, that's way worse than the Buffalo offense, and Buffalo just made a coordinator change. So Kansas City's offense has actually been worse than Buffalo's offense in that stretch. But they've not really done well in the last 5 games at all. But again, you can't coach based on the fact that, they're not going to play well. So the question is now, how much man will we see from Sean Desai and how much zone will we see? And situationally, how will he go about doing that? Because if you're going to play man, then you have to feel good about a matchup on Kelce. Now, Kevin Byard in his prime was a really good man defender on tight ends, and he's matched up to Kelce before in his career and done a good job. I don't think he's quite that level of player anymore as a man-to-man defender. So yeah. I think he will match up to him at times, but I don't think that'll be the bread and butter. I don't think that they'll say, hey, you got him. I think they're going to try to do different things depending on the situation. And it's very possible. Look, we saw them try to bracket and double Tyreek Hill. Obviously, Kelce is a totally different player, but there might be situations where they feel they want to do that with Kelce. The biggest issue you face, or one of the biggest issues you face, and I had a great conversation, I remember last summer with a former defensive coordinator in the league who had just left the game, and he said, when you play Mahomes, one reason it's so hard is because you build your defense to really do a great job within the first 2.5 seconds, because that's the way everything's structured, as you know. And then he said, but then there's the play after 2.5 seconds, and that part's really, really difficult. And it's, there's, you try to have rules, just like the offense has scramble rules. The defense tries to do the same kind of thing, but it's just so hard to stay disciplined when Mahomes starts moving.
Yeah, I mean, he's a different kind of an athlete there, and just the pocket presence. I mean, we can go on and on about Patrick Mahomes. One thing I wanted to ask you about, Greg, is how do you feel like this matchup with A.J. Brown's going to go? Obviously, he's had success here, but I turn on the film, and I'm watching, obviously, look at the last game. Tyreek Hill only had 62 receiving yards and 7.8 yards per catch. So the Chiefs did a pretty good job against a high-powered Minnesota, like Miami Dolphin offense here. And then looking at this Chiefs defensive line, like they got some dogs up front.
They got some dudes, yeah.
You look at the statistics: 31 sacks, second in the NFL. I mean, this team's you got Karlaftis, who's pretty underrated. You got Mike Dana. You got, obviously, Chris Jones. So what are you seeing up front? And then what do you think about that matchup? Obviously, the Chiefs were able to shut down Tyreek Hill, 62 yards. Tyreek Hill, in my opinion, is kind of shutting him down. And then can the Eagles block this team up front that's second in the NFL in sacks?
Well, a bunch there. This game has so much, which is wonderful. For me, I love these kinds of games. It's so fascinating. There's so many great tactical points. So let's unpack a couple of things that you said. Number one, Coach Spagnuolo is a believer in press because he believes in today's NFL with a lot of quick game, a lot of RPOs, the ball comes out really quick. And if you just let receivers get free access, they run those slant routes, those glance routes, even hitches, the ball's out. And if you're just giving them those routes, then it's too easy. Now, he's going to press. Now, we know A.J. Brown is a strong man and can beat press, but I don't think that's going to prevent Coach Spagnuolo from pressing. So we'll see how that matchup goes. A couple of other points regarding that. Number one, they now have made Snead an outside corner 100% of the time. He played in the slot much of last year. McDuffie, who's a very, very physical player, second-year player out of the University of Washington, player whose tape I loved coming out of college. He is their slot corner when they go to sub. And they play a ton of dime, by the way. We'll get to that too. In base, he plays outside with Snead, but when they go nickel and dime, McDuffie moves inside. So your outside corners in sub are Snead and Jalen Watson, who's a big dude. Jalen Watson is a big dude. Not a great player, but a big dude. So that's one thing to look at. The other thing now, and we know the Eagles have a great offensive line, but the Chiefs have 4 or 5 players on their defensive front who can line up in different positions. Jones can line up in multiple positions. Karlaftis can line up in multiple positions. Michael Dana can line up in multiple positions. Charles Omenihu can line up in multiple positions. So they are very multiple with their deployment of personnel up front. And that's just something you have to be aware of. So they do a lot of different things up front. So those are a couple of points. Keep one thing in mind, and it's going to be interesting with the bye week, how Jalen Hurts' knee is, because if you go back to the Super Bowl last year, Jalen Hurts running by design was a big factor in the game. And he's not been able to do that much in recent weeks because we know he has a knee problem. We don't know where that stands. If he feels really good, they may come back to that because that really that poses problems for a defense, clearly. And it's one of the reasons that makes him a special player. But if his knee's still bothering him and he can't do that, and it makes him a little more of a tethered pocket player, Spagnuolo will find that out early, and then it might change the way he decides to pressure.
Yeah, and then one other thing that, I think it needs to be said going into this matchup is there's no Dallas Goedert, and he hasn't had a huge this year, and there's, the numbers aren't popping when you turn on the film. You see them, though. But when you look at the numbers, they're not crazy numbers. But what you got to realize is teams are really hesitant to open up that middle of the field a lot because they know that Goedert is there, and Goedert is a tight end that can make plays. So now, obviously, Quez Watkins isn't playing. You need somebody to step up that'll threaten that middle of the field. So I'm watching to see how the Eagles are going to play this. Are they going to go with Jack Stoll and kind of use that position as a blocker? Are they going to go 4 wide receiver? Are they going to go, who are they bringing in here? Are we going to see Julio Jones? Are we going to see Zacchaeus? Or who are we going to see in there to kind of take over for Dallas Goedert? Now, you can put Swift in the slot a little bit. Doesn't have many snaps out the slot, but it's something he's shown he can do. He can move in and out. So for me, that's another thing to watch is what are they going to do at tight end? And what do you think they do heading into this game with Dallas Goedert being out for up to 5-6 weeks?
And by the way, he was a big factor in the Super Bowl, so he's an important player that they won't have. I'm curious. I love that you mentioned Julio Jones. I'm really curious now that they have extra practice time and extra film time and extra, time with the coaches, however they want to use it. I'm curious to see if Jones becomes more of a factor. Obviously he's a wide receiver, so if he were to play with 3 wide receivers, it would technically be 10 personnel, 4 wide receivers on the field. But could they use him, in cut splits, nasty splits, tight to the formation, almost like a tight end? He's certainly a big man. That's something to take note of. Now that they had the extra week, does Albert O become a factor? Is he now going to be up and ready to go? Because he's actually very athletic for a tight end and a good receiver. So is he someone with that extra practice time that can actually become a factor? Because he has vertical ability. He can stretch the seam. But I just wanted to make one point. I was looking back at my notes from the Super Bowl. In the first half alone in that Super Bowl, I talked about Hurts and the design runs and how important that is and how difficult that is for defenses. In the first half alone in that Super Bowl, Hurts had 10 cold runs for 52 yards in the first half alone. Now, again, we don't know if he can do that, but that really adds a dimension that makes it difficult. And there were times in that first half, by the way, and throughout the game, that the Chiefs deployed a spy on Jalen Hurts. And, obviously that's a philosophy. Some believe in the deployment of a spy, others don't. But we'll see. So, but yeah, it'll be really interesting to see if Julio Jones ends up playing more snaps and how he's deployed now that they had extra time to really work him into what they do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something we're likely to see, because more time will give them more opportunity to get familiar with this offense. And I'm sure Sirianni has a plan there. So,
oh yeah,
Greg, you know what they call this show? What we call this show is Inside the Tape. So to me, there's no better way than talking about the tape and what we're seeing here and expecting in this game. Let's talk through some game film here, and I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to look at some Kansas City Chiefs, Miami Dolphin game film.
Hey, it's Jeff Mosher. I love the fall because football's back, but it's also my busiest season. Between work, kids going back to school, youth sports and activities, there's just not enough time, especially to make a good home-cooked meal. That's why I love HelloFresh. They deliver farm-fresh food with pre-proportioned ingredients and seasonal recipes right to my doorstep. No more wasting time at the grocery store, because America's #1 meal kit helps make home cooking easy, efficient, and affordable. We don't waste time researching new recipes and planning meals. With HelloFresh, the shopping's already done. The perfect amount of ingredients arrive with step-by-step recipe cards. How efficient is that? Plus, HelloFresh saves you time and money. HelloFresh is 25% less expensive than takeout, so you'll get a home-cooked meal without digging deep into your wallet. Don't forget about taste and selection. HelloFresh makes food for meat lovers, seafood lovers, vegetarians, and those who love variety. My personal favorites are the spicy Creole stew and pecan-crusted trout, 2 dinners my whole family enjoyed, and we actually had time to sit down together and eat at the table. Go to HelloFresh.com/50Eagles and use the code 50Eagles for 50% off plus free shipping. That's HelloFresh.com/50Eagles. Use that code 50Eagles for 50% off plus free shipping. Act now for America's #1 meal kit.
You're talking about the cut splits for the Eagles, but here we got some,
cut splits as well. Yeah,
a little motion. And that's the thing, Greg. You always got to be aware of some formation. Coach
they got a
Reed
ton of motion in their offense too. That's a great point, Clay.
motion, and he puts different guys in different positions. Like, who is this lining
That's
up?
McKinnon right now. That's
Yeah.
McKinnon.
Yep.
I mean, now you have McKinnon and Pacheco in the game at the same time. Is that Pacheco?
2 tight end set. McKinnon and Pacheco, I believe so. And obviously they're able to get a –
Yeah, but Andy Reid is a master, and you know this. Andy Reid is a master of use of personnel and formations, and they use a ton of motion. So you have to have a plan for motion because they're going to run a lot of it. Look, we saw how it hurt the Eagles. Of course, different coordinator, but how it hurt the Eagles in the Super Bowl down in the low red zone. Motion is a big deal.
Yep. And here we got 12 personnel. We got
that's 2 tight ends right there. So this is something you'll see a lot of, Clay. 12 close to the boundary, twins to the field. This is a big. Now, much of this depends. Here, freeze it for a sec. Much of this depends on where the back is, because here the back's to the boundary. Oftentimes the back could be on the other side to the field. So much of how you play this depends on where the back is.
Yep.
There you go.
And who is that? Is that Travis Kelce?
Well, that's actually Noah Gray.
Noah Gray.
Who's actually a very good player, by the way. It's
Yes.
just he's on a team with Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
So that's Kelce. This is a high-low. I mean, it's a high-low. It's basically smash. So it's a high-low to the boundary, and Kelce runs the low route. And obviously, because it's Kelce, the corner is going to sit on Kelce, and then you're going to get Gray running, the what you want to call it, an out or a corner, or what, bench, whatever term you want to use. He runs it, and he runs it in front of the safety.
Good protection.
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful design. Because formationally, you very often, this, you've been around a lot of great coaches. Formationally, you often know what you're going to get from the defense. Like they knew that Kelce, when he runs his little out route, that, that corner is going to sit on him.
Yep, absolutely. And Patrick Mahomes, watching so much tape, knows what to expect there. And
this one was actually called back. They said he didn't catch it, but this was a great play. This was beautiful design. Yeah, they actually scored a touchdown on the very next play, because this one, they said that Watson did not catch the ball.
And you see how much attention Travis Kelce's getting over here.
Yep, no question.
And that's why the safety is getting pulled out there, and you expect the Eagles.
And don't forget, in the Super Bowl, Kelce caught that touchdown in the Super Bowl. Again, different coordinator, but he went into what we call Zin motion. He was the Z, so it was Z into the formation. They call Zin motion, as you know, and he ended up getting matched up on Marcus Epps, a safety, and he beat Marcus Epps. You probably recall that play.
Yep. Great protection again. Called back, didn't catch it.
Yeah, but beautifully designed. And then here's empty. Is this the next play? Yeah, this is the next play. I think they went 0. Did they go 0 here?
Very next play, Dolphins.
Let's see if they went 0. Yep.
They go 0 blitz. 0. Perfect call for 0 blitz.
Yeah, they probably anticipated it. By the way, this is the Dolphins, right?
Yep, Dolphins.
You remember the touchdown that the Eagles scored against the Dolphins on the sort of run screen option to Goedert for 17 yards in the high red zone? Yep. They also went 0, the Dolphins, on that play, because that is a tendency for Vic Fangio. He's not a big 0 guy, but you get in the red zone and they tend to do that. And obviously we're watching the Chiefs versus the Dolphins, and obviously the Chiefs knew that as well.
Yeah, so right there we get a little taste of some of the things the Chiefs are able to do on offense, Greg. And let's go and watch a little bit of Chiefs defense now.
Yeah, and a couple of points on the Chiefs defense. When they play dime, because they played the second highest percentage of dime, Clay, in the NFL. And they've got 3 really, really good safeties. They're somewhat interchangeable. They tend to use Justin Reed as their tight end matchup, but they have Reed, they have Brian Cook, they have Mike Edwards. 3 safeties that are really, really good players. Really good players. And they play maybe 26, 27% of their defensive snaps are out of dime. So those 3 safeties together on the field quite a bit.
So, Greg, remember you talking about how they can disguise coverage.
Yep.
And this is just a perfect demonstration of what they're able to do and how they rotate. You see that rotation right there?
There you go.
Confusing quarterbacks.
Because look, pre-snap, it's funny. If you freeze it just before, or literally as he takes the snap, freeze it.
Yeah.
Or he's seeing one thing right now. All of a sudden, it changed, and he's going to take the snap literally. Right. So all of it changed. It changed again. So there were, in a sense, 2 changes. He sees one change, probably in his mind thinks, okay, this is what I see, and then all of a sudden there's another rotation, and now he's seeing it differently.
And Tua is still able to complete that ball, even as good as they are. Disguise right there. Then they do it again. Anderson in a slot blitz. Wow.
But here's the thing. The way quarterbacks are taught, and I'm simplifying, but this is how it starts. And you probably know this. You're an offensive guy, so you know. Quarterbacks are taught, is it middle open, middle closed, and what are my blitz alerts? I'm simplifying it, but that's kind of the starting point. And even though they did a lot of rotation here, they stayed with middle closed. They stayed with a single high safety. So it didn't really – it didn't totally screw up Tua.
Yeah, it didn't go from 1 high to 2 high or so.
Right,
so we still had a lot of the same rules.
Right.
But nice play right there.
But they're really tough. I mean, but I think, again, the Eagles can score. We saw them in the Super Bowl score a lot of points, but that's why I keep pointing out about the Hurts design run factor, because his running was such a huge factor in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, he did he was so good at the zone read and was just able to take advantage of a lot of things. And the Chiefs defense isn't getting a lot of credit when they really should be.
Oh, they've been the driving force, Clay, over the last 5-6 games, because the offense has not been very good.
And look at this D line, Greg. We'll look at it from the type
They got
view
a really
here.
good D line.
So obviously they're going to try to run this to the strength.
And I'm telling you, whoever plays right guard, Chris Jones is going to line up over him, and they're going to have to slide Kelce there when it gets to passing situations. And that means on the other side of the slide, you're going to get a lot of man blocking, and you're going to get some pressures. It'll be very interesting to see how all that plays out.
Very underrated defensive line.
Very underrated. It's a great point.
And then I got a couple more.
And they got a really good, it's funny how things work out. They signed Drew Tranquil, who played with the Chargers the last number of years. Very good linebacker. And when they signed him, I thought, okay, boy, that's a weird signing. Why would Tranquil want to go there? They have Nick Bolton and Willie Gay. And here Bolton gets hurt, and he's going to be out 2 months. And now Tranquil plays literally every snap, and he's a really good player. I mean, Spags has been doing this a long time, Clay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's won 2 Super Bowls as a D coordinator. I'm always fascinated by coaches that do a lot of things and the players execute them with such efficiency, because that tells me that the way they present it to the players is really clear.
And Coach Reid is really good about simplifying things. And, I can attest to that. Obviously, being a part of that offense for, over 3 years, he's good at simplifying things and letting players play fast. You have an answer for everything. You're going to be very familiar. You're going to know the game plan, and you're not going to be surprised by anything when Coach Reid, the way he coaches you, and all of them are on the same page. So he's going to come to this game with a tight game plan, knowing exactly how to attack these guys. And obviously, you'd love to beat the Eagles on Monday Night Football.
Yeah, so the main thing, if you're talking about, the Eagles D, let's say, and we touched on it, is those second reaction plays, those second reaction movement plays, improvisational plays by Mahomes, because those can be backbreakers. And you know what it's like. You're an offensive guy, but still, it's 3rd and 9, and you feel like you have a good plan on defense. Maybe you get pressure, and all of a sudden Mahomes escapes, moves around, and hits, whether it's Kelce or whoever, hits him for 20 yards, and it's a first down. And, boy, those kinds of plays are demoralizing.
Yeah. This is the last clip we're going to look at, Greg, and this is just them later in the game going down the field and wore them down a little bit. So you're starting to see you're getting a couple of yards here on the ground. And then you see how they react a little bit to motion.
But you see how they play press? This is a Spagnuolo thing. He does not want to give up those easy releases. Now, he may get burned on that. A.J. Brown's phenomenal versus press. He's so strong. He's so physical. He could get burned. I mean, that's the chess match. We're not taking sides here. We're presenting the way the teams play. Yep. And how it turns out, that's why you're going to play the game. But this is how the teams play.
That's pretty good coverage too. That's
really good coverage. Yep.
Yeah,
that was really good coverage, even though it was a touchdown.
Yeah.
One other thing about the Chiefs offense, they are willing to run the ball. We saw that in the Super Bowl when they came out in the 3rd quarter, but they're willing to run the ball. I mean, their foundation is not the run game. They're not going to have 35 or 40 rushes, but they are willing to run the ball.
Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty good coverage. He just couldn't find the ball.
It's one of those things. Those guys get paid too.
Yeah,
is what we always used to say. And I lied. We got one more clip, Greg, to show. Yeah, Andy's good at the play action. He's got some misdirection stuff in there. Obviously, he's going to let Pat Mahomes make some plays, but he doesn't got the weapons he's had in the past. Rashee Rice is having a nice little year. Obviously they got Harbin back. They got Sky Moore, but
Yeah, they don't have that one wide receiver that you say he's the guy, but they are really good. To me, if you don't have the one guy who let's say you can count on in a critical high leverage situation, Clay, to say, okay, we want to get AJ Brown as our boundary X 1-on-1. We feel really good that he can beat anybody. They don't have that guy, the Chiefs. So when you don't have that guy, what does it come down to? It comes down to scheming. It comes down to formations. It comes down to motion. It comes down to all those things that coaches should be doing, because you don't have the guy that you can say, hey, we can just get it to him, and you know what? He's going to make a play. And Andy Reid's really good at that.
Yeah, he definitely is. And yeah, there you see, get some pressure on Mahomes. Obviously can beat you in a number of ways. Like to see how Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick do. Obviously, Jalen Carter, Fletcher Cox in the middle there.
Yep.
Williams.
Well, I would say the strength of their O-line is inside. Their tackles are solid, not terrible, but I say the strength versus Tooney at one guard and Troy Smith at the other guard, and then Creed Humphrey is one of the best centers in the league. That's the strength of the Chiefs O-line.
Absolutely. Well, Greg, I think we did a good job of highlighting this matchup. It's going to be a fun Monday night for all of us watching this one. Two of the best teams in the league. If you like football, I mean, this is the matchup for you.
This is it.
Two good teams. Could be a Super Bowl preview. So I know I'm looking forward to it. But good stuff here, Greg. Let's put a bow on this. This one's been another excellent episode as my office lights turn out. Another episode of Inside the Tape, brought to you by the Inside the Bird Podcast Network. On behalf of myself, Clay Harbor, former NFL tight end, Greg Cosell, NFL Films, the man that watches more tape than anyone, we wish you guys a good day, and we'll see you again on Monday Night Football. Fly, Eagles, fly.